You had to go within. The sacred absence. There are seasons on the path where it feels like life has gone quiet. Not peaceful quiet, not restful quiet, but the kind of quiet that echoes, the kind where the phone doesn't ring. The invitations stop, the relationships fall away, the manifestations feel delayed, the fun feels forced, the love you hoped for does not arrive, the joy you imagined feels just out of reach, and the unawakened call, this punishment, but the chosen, eventually, come to know it by its true name, initiation. There are things the soul cannot learn while constantly fed by noise, attention, pleasure, validation, and distraction. There are truths that only reveal themselves in the absence of what once kept you occupied. You thought you were going without because life had forgotten you, but life had not forgotten you. Life was removing what prevented you from meeting yourself. This was never rejection. It was redirection into the inner temple, because some lessons cannot be downloaded in crowds. Some healings cannot happen in romance. Some forms of love cannot be accessed while chasing them outside yourself. You had to go without, so you would finally go within. And within, you would find the very thing you were starving for. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below so we know you're here and connected to Source. The empty hands were not a curse. When the chosen begin losing what they once relied on, it often feels cruel. The connection fades. The opportunities dry up. The love story does not happen. The old pleasures stop satisfying. The external world stops giving the same response. And with empty hands, the ego panics. It says, "Why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? Why does everyone else seem to have what I don't? Why am I being made to wait?" But the soul is not asking those questions. The soul is whispering, "Now that your hands are empty, what are you ready to receive?" Because empty hands are not always loss. Sometimes they are preparation. If your hands are full of the wrong people, you cannot hold aligned love. If your life is full of numbing habits, you cannot hear divine guidance. If your field is cluttered with noise, fantasy, and unprocessed longing, you cannot stabilize the frequency of what is truly yours. The universe often clears before it delivers, and the clearing feels like going without. But what you call without is often just the removal of what could not come where you are going. Isolation was a mirror, not a punishment. There is a type of loneliness that arrives before self-remembrance. It is sharp at first. It feels like exclusion, like silence, like everyone else is living and you are pausing, like life has moved into another room and closed the door. But isolation, when understood spiritually, is not exile. It is concentration. It is the universe pulling your energy away from the many so you can finally meet the one within. In isolation, the masks become heavy. The patterns become visible. The distractions lose their seduction. And the self you keep running from begins to sit across from you. This is why so many fear solitude. Because solitude removes the external buffer. There is no one to blame, no one to impress, no one to chase, no one to project onto, only you. And for the chosen, this is the sacred corridor. Because once you stop fearing your own company, you stop begging the world to distract you from yourself. You begin to realize the silence was not empty. It was introducing you to your own soul. Celibacy, restraint, and the recovery of power. There are seasons where the chosen are pulled away from lust, from entanglement, from misaligned intimacy, from compulsive pleasure-seeking. To the ego, this can feel like deprivation. But in truth, it is a return of power. Your life force is not casual. Your body is not a public access point. Your intimacy is not meant to be exchanged with those who cannot even hold your truth. Celibacy, whether literal, energetic, or symbolic, is not always about denying pleasure. Sometimes it is about restoring clarity. Because when your body is no longer occupied by misaligned exchange, your signal strengthens. You hear more. You feel more. You discern more. You stop confusing chemistry with destiny. You stop confusing attention with love. You stop confusing hunger with alignment. And in that restraint, something profound happens. You recover your own current. The chosen often discover that much of what they called love was actually distraction. Much of what they called passion was actually avoidance. Much of what they called fun was an anesthetic against deeper truths. So the universe starves the habit, not to hurt you, to free you. Because what you are meant to receive next cannot arrive while your field is still entangled with what drains you. The breaking of cycles requires the starving of habits. Patterns do not die because you dislike them. Patterns die because you stop feeding them. You say you want a new life, but a new life cannot be built on old appetite. If you keep feeding the urge to chase unavailable people, the habit of scrolling when you should be listening, the cycle of returning to what already hurt you, the addiction to comfort over calling, the reflex of self-abandonment for connection, then your life will continue to circle the same altar. This is why going within often requires going without constant entertainment, without endless stimulation, without emotional junk food, without the people who keep you performing an outdated version of yourself. And yes, it can feel like starvation, because the false self is hungry. It feeds on repetition. It survives on unconsciousness. So when you begin to deny it, what it has always consumed, it thrashes, it bargains, it seduces, it panics, it tells you to go back. But this is not a sign to return. It is a sign that the old pattern is losing food, and every cycle you stop feeding becomes weaker. Every habit you interrupt becomes less authoritative. Every time you choose consciousness over compulsion, you reclaim territory inside yourself. That is how the chosen break ancient loops, not by wishing, by starving what no longer deserves to live in their field. Shadow work was hidden inside the lack. The chosen often think shadow work begins in meditation, journaling, or ritual. But shadow work often begins in longing, in the ache, in the thing you do not have, in the thing you desperately want, in the thing that seems delayed. Because absence reveals attachment, and attachment reveals belief. When love does not come, what does that awaken in you? When success is delayed, what story surfaces? When joy feels distant, what identity speaks first? Do you hear? I'm not chosen. I'm not enough. It never works for me. I'll always go without. I have to settle. Maybe this is all I get. These are not just thoughts. These are shadow statements. They are buried programs rising to the surface because the external world has stopped anesthetizing them. That is why lack is not always a problem. Sometimes it is a flashlight. It shows you the inner sentence you have been living under. And once it is seen, it can be challenged. The chosen discover that much of their suffering was not from what was missing, but from the meaning they attached to the missing thing. And that meaning, once healed, frees the future. You are always the love of your own life. This is one of the deepest initiations, to discover that the love you were searching for externally was never meant to replace the relationship you were avoiding with yourself. The chosen often seek in others what they have not yet stabilized within: reassurance, worth, devotion, safety, recognition, intimacy, acceptance. But no one can sustainably give you what you refuse to build inside. Even when love arrives, it will feel threatening if you do not feel safe with yourself. Even when aligned partnership appears, it will feel foreign if you have only known chaos. Even when devotion is offered, you may not trust it if you have not yet learned to remain with yourself in truth. That is why the universe sometimes withholds romance, not as cruelty, as correction, so you can become the first great love of your own life. And this is not a cliché, it is a calibration. When you learn to stay with yourself, in loneliness, in discomfort, in desire, in grief, in uncertainty, you build inner union. And once inner union is formed, external love is no longer an emergency. It becomes an extension, a resonance, a match, not a rescue. The chosen who go within discover something beautiful. The deepest relationship they were ever meant to stabilize first was the one with their own soul. Silence was teaching you to hear. The external world is loud on purpose. It is built to capture attention, fragment energy, and keep consciousness reactive. Noise is profitable. Distraction is addictive. Overstimulation is a form of spiritual static. And static keeps you from hearing your intuition, your ancestors, your inner knowing, your body's warnings, your higher timeline calling. This is why going within often looks like silence. Less talking, less consuming, less reacting, less performing, less explaining. At first, silence feels unfamiliar. Then it feels revealing. Then it feels holy. Because in silence, you begin to hear what has always been speaking. A nudge, a knowing, a correction, a memory, a sacred no, a precise yes. The universe does not only speak in miracles, it speaks in subtleties. But subtleties are drowned in noise. So the chosen are often pulled into quieter seasons, not because they are disconnected, but because they are being retuned. Silence is not the absence of guidance. It is the environment where guidance becomes audible. The endings were an act of mercy. Not every ending was a tragedy. Some were rescue in disguise, the connection you outgrew, the friendship that dissolved, the relationship that no longer fit, the environment that started suffocating you, the old version of yourself that kept dying. You thought these endings meant something was wrong. But often, endings are the most merciful form of divine intervention. Because the longer you stay where you no longer belong, the more you betray your future. Endings cut cords. Endings close loops. Endings stop leakage. Endings return energy. The chosen are often forced into endings because they would have stayed too long from loyalty, nostalgia, fear, guilt, or hope. So life ends it for them. Again, not as punishment, as mercy. And once the ending is honored, the space left behind becomes fertile. This is the mystery of loss. What leaves creates room, and room is what the new needs. Once you dive deep enough, you stop seeking the surface. There comes a point in the inner journey where you realize you do not miss the old distractions. You do not ache for the same empty pleasures. You do not crave being seen by people who cannot recognize your depth. You do not need noise to feel alive, because once you have touched the deeper chambers of yourself, surface living loses its seduction. You begin to hunger for truth, not stimulation, substance, not performance, resonance, not attention, alignment, not temporary relief. And this is why the chosen, once they truly go within, can never fully go back. They may visit old patterns briefly. They may feel temptation. They may remember the old ways. But something fundamental has changed. They have tasted depth. And depth makes counterfeit nourishment obvious. This is why going within is irreversible. Because once you discover the richness of your own inner world, you stop asking the external world to entertain you into forgetfulness. You become harder to distract, harder to manipulate, harder to seduce with things that no longer match your frequency. And that is power. You will never go without again. This does not mean you will never face a quiet season. It does not mean life will never challenge you. It means something deeper. Once you have truly gone within, you no longer experience lack the same way. Because now, when something is absent, you do not collapse. When something ends, you do not lose yourself. When external life grows quiet, you do not assume abandonment. You know too much now. You know that silence can be sacred. You know that delay can be preparation. You know that endings can be mercy. You know that you are never truly without, because you have found a well inside yourself that the world cannot shut off. This is the secret the chosen uncover. Inner fullness changes everything. You attract differently. You love differently. You choose differently. You receive differently. And because of this, your life begins to align with the frequency you now carry. The love that comes now is different. The joy is different. The connections are different. The manifestations are different. Why? Because you no longer accept what only distracts you from yourself. You have met yourself too deeply to settle for what cannot meet you there. That is why, once you truly go within, you do not go without again. Because you are no longer waiting for life to complete you. You have become available to life from a place of wholeness. And wholeness magnetizes what scarcity could never hold. The sacred return, chosen one, you thought the season of without meant the universe had turned away from you. But now you understand. You are being turned inward, not away from life, deeper into it. Not denied, refined, not forgotten, prepared. You had to go without certain connections, so you would stop confusing company with alignment. You had to go without certain relationships, so you would stop calling attachment love. You had to go without constant fun, so you would stop using stimulation to avoid your own depths. You had to go without some manifestations, so you would stop measuring your worth by visible proof. You had to go without external validation, so you could hear the ancient voice within you say, I was always here. I was always enough. I was always the home you were seeking. This was the journey. To meet yourself so deeply that nothing misaligned could ever satisfy you again. To become so inwardly anchored that the world could no longer distract you from your own truth. To love yourself so honestly that what enters your life next must match that honesty. And now, you are no longer starving. You are discerning. You are no longer deprived. You are devoted. You are no longer empty. You are available. The path of going within has changed your frequency. And because your frequency has changed, your life must now answer it. So let the aligned love come. Let the sacred joy return. Let the true connections find you. Let the manifestations arrive. Let the right life meet the right version of you. Because you had to go without to discover the one place you were never truly lacking. And having found it, you will never go without again. Ancient One, we now ask you, which connections or relationships had to leave your life so that you could finally meet myself without distraction? Or what did silence teach you about yourself that noise and distraction never could? Please be sure to comment below, like and subscribe to stay aligned and connected to Source.